So following the NFL season, I just wanted to go through and highlight some common themes and what seemed to overall work really well for this past NFL season. So starting with rushing, there's a few subcategories here. I would really say that the 2024 season had a lot of heavy emphasis on the running game, and I think that really the common theme here was seeing a lot of teams trading for an elite running back from a more developing team. And I really think this is something that almost dates back to the 49ers getting McCaffrey from the Panthers just a few years ago and then seeing how that played out. Of course, he was injured this past year, but before that, I think that really provided an excellent model, since we do know that the NFL is a copycat league. So I think that's why over the past offseason, you saw the Ravens grabbing Derrick Henry from the Titans. You saw the Eagles grabbing Saquon Barkley from the Giants. And then you have the Packers getting Josh Jacobs from the Raiders. And I would say that this worked out extremely well for all of these teams. I would say that all three of these backs definitely finished in the top 5. Going to the other rushing main theme of this year, I think we are gradually seeing more and more teams adopt a committee in terms of 2 elite running backs. I think we've continued to see the use of this. And I really would say that the biggest demonstration for what a really good committee would look like was Miami in 2023. We saw this with A-Chain and Mostert. He had a lot of injuries from both of them, but I would really say that that carried a long way for the 2024 season. I would also say the Lions are another team that have been doing this too, after getting Gibbs from Alabama in the first round of the 2023 draft. A few other examples would be the Commanders, even having upwards to 4 running backs that they would rotate in there, and we saw this with Robinson and Eckler and even a few other running backs due to those injuries. But I think this was really interesting, especially having a quarterback who can run like Daniel, so you don't always have as many runs, I would say, from the Commanders. Or I would even say the Ravens are one of the more underrated teams in terms of their committee, because even though we see Derrick Henry getting the ball a lot, you really have Hill, who's pretty much there for a lot of those check downs and a lot of those quick passes and a good amount of speed, not nearly the amount of power from Derrick Henry, but a good amount of speed there, and really is strong in those receptions. And I would say you also have the Chiefs, for example, who are looking to incorporate more of a committee towards the end of the season. We saw this with how Kareem Hunt performed during the Pacheco injury, and then after Pacheco came back, we're still seeing a good mix between both of them, and you still also have P. Ryan coming in on third downs. So I think we're seeing a lot more of an even rotation between running backs across the league. And then I think in terms of the rushing game really evolving, I think the other big theme is having a lot of quarterbacks that can run well or run fairly well. And I would say roughly about half of the playoff teams at least have the ability for their quarterback to take off and run well. I would say in terms of the best quarterbacks for this year, when we're looking at running, obviously Lamar Jackson is the first to come to mind. Josh Allen, I would really say that Jaden Daniels is really solidifying the direction in terms of the mobile quarterback. And I would say that combination of these 3 subcategories has really led to just a slightly more overall rushing focused league. And I would say that this can really be measured in terms of having a decrease in overall passing yards for the past year. And then sticking with offensive strategy overall, I think you're also seeing slightly less deep passes, even though I would say that the passing game is still fairly strong. You are just seeing a slight decrease in those really deep passes, and I would say that this is likely due to just faster wideouts and overall better secondaries. So I would say that this just makes passing deep a little bit more worrisome. There is a little bit more of a trend towards shorter or quick passes. We've seen a lot of screens, and I would say that shorter and quick passes also work really well to mitigate blitzes, but I would still say that the aggression is there in other ways. And I think one of the more interesting things of this past season, and even looking at how this is affecting the playoffs, is seeing a lot more teams being likely to go for it on 4th down. down, specifically 4th and short. And I think this is really just due to maybe an analytical change in terms of the data that's now being present in terms of the effectiveness or the overall outcome of going for it on 4th and short. And I would say in terms of the playoffs, we just saw this work out for the Commanders. But if we're looking at the Lions, and they're pretty much going for it on every 4th and short, and them leading the league in terms of points per game, it's really hard to argue with this new, more aggressive trend. And then another neat offensive thing, I think this is a little bit more of a minor thing, but I think something that has worked fairly well has been the occasional lateral this year. We've seen that from a lot of receivers after receptions. I would say before this year, you usually would just see this in terms of it being a little bit more of a rushing equivalent to a Hail Mary to end the game. But seeing this a lot in games just to get a first down, I think has been increasingly more common. And I do think that it's shown a lot more promise than maybe some other trick plays like flea flickers or position players throwing passes behind the line of scrimmage, just because that takes so long. And this is just something that can be done really quick to get an extra 5-10 or even completely separate from the defense here. I do think that this has been something that's been really effective this year. And I think a lot of focus here is on the offense. I do think we have noticed a few defensive changes and evolutions this year as well. I wouldn't say that the blitz rates have gone up necessarily, but I think we really have seen an increase in the sack rate this year, and I think this is likely due to a lot more complicated defensive schemes and really causing a lot of confusion instead of just bringing an all-out blitz within itself. And I think this a little bit more intricate style in terms of blitzing but still having a really tight coverage. The common theme for defensive schemes has really been to send about 5 rushers, but you're having a much more complex secondary at the same time with quarter or palm coverages. We're seeing a lot better bluffs in terms of faking a blitz and dropping back into coverages, and you're also having a lot of other little tricks to confuse offenses, such as last minute shifts. So those would be some of the main themes for the 2024 season, and I'll see you later.